Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 102 Registration and Agreements webinar. This recording is from July 11th, 2025, and information presented reflects the most current details available as of July 2025. Okay, let's start off with our legal disclaimer. This is a reminder that Circular Action Alliance is not an attorney nor law firm and does not provide legal advice or recommendations. Please do not take our advice as such. Information in this presentation is not substitute for the advice of an attorney. Please seek the advice of legal counsel as necessary. Okay, moving on to our antitrust reminder. As with the nature of EPR, there are many competitors on this call, so please do not discuss any of the topics on the right. CAA will not discuss any of the topics on the right in order to comply with federal, state, and international antitrust or competition laws. Okay, starting off with our important welcome reminders. As a reminder, this is the 102 registration and agreement session, and this session will focus on how to register and sign necessary legal agreements like the Participant Producer Agreement, PPA, and state addenda with CAA. This webinar is the second in our three-part onboarding series. We also have the 101 webinar that provides an overview of EPR, CAA, and resources to help you determine if you should register with CAA. Additionally, we have our 103 webinar, which focuses on budgeting for EPR fees. And this session will provide information on how EPR fees are set and information to support internal budgeting. As a reminder, if you have any questions related to registration or CAA's agreements, please email producer.support@circularaction.org. For our agenda today, we plan to cover the producer journey, steps to registration, the participant producer agreement, the state addenda, and Minnesota registration. Okay, starting off with our producer journey. Before businesses begin the registration journey, there are two primary questions businesses need to ask that will help them determine if they are obligated under EPR laws. One, is the material associated with my products covered by the EPR laws? And two, is my business the responsible producer for those materials? EPR laws for packaging and paper vary from state to state, but are generally designed to apply to single-use packaging, paper, and some disposable products. As the first step in the process of identifying whether your company has obligations under an EPR law, companies should review with their attorneys the definition of each material type to determine whether the materials associated with the products placed on the market in an obligated state are subject to EPR laws. Second, companies should review the producer hierarchy associated with the covered materials to determine if their business is the obligated producer for those materials. If you believe you might be obligated, these are the steps in the producer journey. Producers begin their journey by registering with CAA. Once you've registered and signed your Participant Producer Agreement, or PPA, you'll receive access to our reporting portal where you'll be able to upload your supply report. After registering and getting access to the reporting portal, producers will be able to submit a supply report for various EPR states that they are obligated in. For Oregon, the first reporting deadline was March 31st, so if you have not yet submitted your Oregon report, please do so as soon as possible. Oregon final fees and invoices were sent in June, and the program began on July 1st. The next reporting deadline is for Colorado on July 31st. Okay, moving on to the overview of the registration process that producers will go through. So the first step in the registration process is to complete the registration form on CAA's website. The form will ask you to provide company information and contact information for a primary contact and an authorized representative. After submitting that form, CAA will process your information and send your authorized representative a copy of the Participant Producer Agreement, or PPA, via DocuSign. Once the PPA is signed, you'll gain access to the reporting guidance and will be set to receive credentials for the producer portal. For each state where you're obligated in, companies will sign a specific state addendum that outlines state-specific requirements and formalizes your obligation. Not all state addenda are finalized as they are dependent on the finalization of EPR regulations in states where CAA operates, and thus Oregon and Colorado are the only EPR states that CAA has state addendas for currently, and the Minnesota interim state addendum will be available in August and is currently going through a consultation period that will last until July 18th. Each state addendum will be developed by CAA and be provided to producers and will include state-specific policies, procedures, rules, and requirements applicable to the producer in that state. State addenda will not be required to access the guidebook, but will be required to submit data to CAA in the producer portal. As a reminder, the Oregon State Addendum and the Colorado State Addendum are currently being sent out to producers who have signed the PPA. After both the PPA and state addenda have been signed, producers will have the ability to submit a supply report into the producer portal. This supply report will determine the amount of fees a producer will pay for the specific state program they submitted for. And as I mentioned earlier, invoices for Oregon were sent in June. Okay. Throughout the registration process, CAA uses terminology to describe the various stages and agreements producers will need to complete in order to become a member with CAA and a participant in a state program. Our account registration form begins your journey with CAA, and your company will become an applicant as you complete the form and CAA confirms your registration. Once CAA confirms your registration and the Participant Producer Agreement, or PPA, is sent to your authorized representative for signature, and the PPA is signed, your company now becomes a registrant with CAA. It is only when you sign a state addendum for a state-specific program that your company becomes a participant in that state program and becomes obligated for reporting and paying fees for that state program. In this webinar, we will detail out the specific agreements that will account for, starting with the account registration form. Okay, and before we dive into the account registration form, we just wanted to note that in July 2025, CAA published 3 producer policies, which are now available on our new Producer Policies webpage. CAA establishes and maintains policies that outline producer obligations under extended producer responsibility laws and participation in the Producer Responsibility Organization, or PRO. These policies define the specific requirements producers must meet, covering registration, reporting, and fee payments to remain in good standing and fully compliant with the EPR programs and CAA participation agreements. On the Producer Policies webpage, producers can find detailed standards for registration, reporting, and payment applicable to all participant producers who are registered with CAA. Okay, now let's go ahead and dive deeper into our registration process, beginning with our account registration form. To access the registration form, you can find it on the producer registration page of our website by clicking Register Now or by going to circularactionalliance.org/registration. Who should complete the registration form? Each obligated entity as designated by an Employer Identification Number, or EIN number, should register. We encourage each obligated entity to register with CAA as their own registration. This means that if your company has multiple employer identification numbers that fall under the rules of obligation, you should register separately for each of those EINs. What if you believe you might be exempt? So exclusions are generally categories of materials that are not covered materials under the EPR program, and therefore there's no obligated producer and no need to register or report. In this scenario, the producer does not need to register, but we encourage those producers to still sign up for a newsletter in order to stay informed. There are also exemptions from the program that often require approval by a regulator for a proportion of volume that are covered materials in the program, or a designation based on size, such as the small producer exemption. So if you have covered materials and are an obligated producer, you will need to still register, sign the PPA, and possibly also need to report your material supply if applicable, and ultimately attest to any exemptions annually for each state program in the CAA producer portal. We strongly encourage these producers to register and sign the PPA. You will answer reporting questions in the portal that will exclude you from having to report and pay fees based on the exemptions that you meet. The primary contact should be the one to complete the registration form on behalf of the company and know who their authorized representative will be to add them to the registration form. The primary contact and the authorized representative can be the same person, and if you need to change those designations in the future, please email producer.support@circularaction.org. Okay, what information is required to register? So all the information that you see here on the screen is the data that you will need to register. On the account registration form, we'll ask for your company information and for contact information for two key contacts at your company, which will be the primary contact and the authorized representative. For the company information, we'll ask for the company name, the tax ID, address, and website. If your company has multiple EINs, we ask that each unique EIN register with CAA, and we'll ask that each individual EIN report. We recognize that some companies have a large number of EINs, so if your company would rather submit one report altogether that represents supply information for the parent company and all of its subsidiaries, we request that your company fill out the parent company exception request form, which can be sent if you are requesting it through producer.support@circularaction.org. When completing the parent company exception request form, you will need to have the legal names and EINs of all of the associated subsidiaries that the parent company would like to report for. This form is still open, so if your company has not reported yet or would like to complete this form, please do so as soon as possible. As a reminder, if your company did sign the parent company exception request and report, your company will need to keep the structure for the exception across all agreements and states that you plan to report in. We also ask for information like revenue and industry. We use this data for prioritization and understanding the producer landscape. You can estimate your revenue or put in $1 if you don't feel comfortable disclosing your revenue to us. Finally, as I mentioned on the slide before, we ask for your primary contact and authorized representative. Each company can only have one primary contact and one authorized representative. The primary contact and the authorized representative can be the same person. The primary contact will be the main contact on the account and the contact that CAA will notify of upcoming requirements or requests. The authorized representative is the person who signs legal contracts like the PPA and state addenda. And as of March 2025, both the primary contact and the authorized representative can submit supply reports to CAA on the producer portal. Okay, and with all of that, I will go ahead and pass it over to my colleague Matt to discuss the PPA and state addenda in further detail.
Great, thanks, Savannah. You can proceed to the next slide. Alrighty, I will start with a timeline of the 4 states where CAA currently has open registration and is the approved pro in. Starting with Oregon at the top, and just as a reminder, this is recorded in July, so I'll be speaking to these dates as they've happened so far and the future dates that'll happen as of July 11th. So the Oregon report was the first supply report due in any state. That was due March 31st using 2024 calendar year data. So after that deadline, the final fee rates were determined and invoices were issued in June. The program launched July 1st of this year, so it is the first program to officially launch in the US. The bonus LCA reports are due on August 15th, and the 2026 Oregon program year EPR fee schedule will be published October 1st prior to invoicing for 2026. That will happen in December of 2025. Colorado's reporting portal opened June 2nd ahead of the reporting deadline of July 31st. That report also uses calendar year 2024 data. The fees for Colorado will be announced after the reporting deadline, the end of October, and prior to the program start, which is January 1st of 2026. The 2026 EPR due invoices will be issued for Colorado. Moving on to California, I'll start at the end here on the farthest to the right. So one important distinction between California's reporting deadline, which is November 15th, and Oregon and Colorado's is that California's data year is calendar year 2023. That is used to set the baseline for the California program. That reporting portal will open on September 15th, 2 months ahead of the report deadline. Continuing to kind of move backwards here, the registration deadline is September 5th, and the registration portal is opening August 1st. Lastly, Minnesota, the registration form and portal launched April 22nd. So that was ahead of the July 1st Minnesota registration deadline. The interim report date is still to be determined. And as a kind of conclusion to this slide here, if you are listening to this or watching this video and you have missed any of these deadlines, you are an obligated producer in any one of these states, you are still obligated to register and submit reports and pay fees or dues, as they're called in Colorado, for those reports. So if you've missed any of these deadlines, please go ahead and still register and get those reports submitted to CAA. Great. I think we can go ahead and move on now to the participant producer agreement. As the single pro approved in Colorado, California, Minnesota, and the only active pro in Oregon, producers are required to join CAA or comply individually where allowed. Producers are required to join the pro or apply to be an independent producer. A participant producer is someone who expects to be obligated under any of the EPR laws where CAA has been selected as the pro. Each company must review the definition of obligated producer in each state, along with CAA's guidance. The PPA contains the terms and conditions between producers and CAA, outlining the actions to be taken by both producers and CAA to ensure that statutory obligations are fulfilled under the state EPR laws. Terms and conditions include CAA's obligations as the pro, the producer's obligations as the regulated entity. So this includes things like reporting, record keeping, and fee obligations. Also includes confidentiality, dispute resolution, and there are some other contents which I will dive deeper into in the next 2 slides after this one. Companies that sign the PPA will receive access to CAA's producer services team, our reporting portal, additional guidance, and training to begin preparing in a timely manner for reporting in Colorado. If you're listening to this in July still, that deadline is happening July 31st, 2025. And to submit a late report in Oregon as soon as possible. Now we can talk a little bit more about the specifics of the PPA. So the purpose of the PPA is to establish a working relationship between your company and CAA by outlining consistent terms and conditions between participant producers and Circular Action Alliance. In 2024, we conducted an extensive consultation process with registered producers, and we have incorporated that feedback into the final version of the document. At this stage, we are not accepting further edits to the PPA. CAA's obligations under the PPA, the topic areas on the left, include administering the program plan in each relevant state, developing a methodology to set fee rates per state, providing producer support for registration, reporting, and fee payments. CAA is also able to register producers on their behalf, But to do that in CalRecycle's electronic system, we will need producers registered with CAA before April 1st, 2026. The participant producer is obligated by the PPA to share accurate information about the company, report data to CAA in states where it signs a state addenda, maintain accurate records with CAA, pay fees in a timely manner once they have signed a state addenda and reported their data. And lastly, producers are obligated to identify themselves. Companies that sign the PPA will not be able to report to CAA until they sign a state addendum. We will discuss the state addendum later in this presentation. Great. For the last two topic areas that you see on your left, I will discuss the confidentiality and signatory clauses. So starting with confidentiality, the producer's information will be protected and may only be viewed by entities who need to know and may be used for only the program. Now, what does that mean? Some states require the pro to share a list of registered producers, and we'll provide that in accordance with the law. We will not share any competitive information externally, including revenue or anything that puts us non-compliant with antitrust laws. Our IT systems are secure, and we enforce secure restrictions on how any data is shared externally. Lastly, for the signatory clauses, we are requiring that an authorized representative sign the PPA. This person is authorized to act on behalf of the producer to bind the company, sign legal agreements, and submit material supply data to CAA. The next slide, great. How and when will I receive my PPA? Once registrations are received, that would be filling out the registration form on CAA's website. The CAA team will review and send over the PPA to the authorized representative via DocuSign for signature. There have been instances where the DocuSign email is blocked by a company's spam filter, so to avoid any delays or disruptions, it can be helpful to contact your IT team to whitelist the inbound traffic from @docusign.circularaction.org. To note, if a company has an obligated subsidiary with its own EIN, producers should register each of their subsidiary companies individually, as Savannah mentioned earlier. By default, if you register multiple subsidiaries, a PPA will be sent to each entity for signature. If you would prefer to have only the parent entity receive the PPA to sign on behalf of the parent and the subsidiary entities, you are able to do so. There is the form that we have available to indicate that you would like to sign one PPA. You are also welcome to reach out to us at producer.support for further assistance. Great, so we've talked a little bit about the PPA now. Now we will jump more into the state addenda. They are complementary agreements. So the state addenda is what actually formally obligates you in a particular state. If you do not indicate in your registration form that you are an obligated producer in a particular state, you will not be sent that state's addendum. The document does obligate producer fees and dues with CAA. Therefore, they are written in conjunction with state program plans. At this time, only the Oregon and Colorado state addenda are available for signature. Future state addenda will be made available as state regulations and program plans are completed. We are expecting to have the Minnesota and the California interim state addenda available later this year. Minnesota's state addenda, or interim state addenda, I should say, is expected to be announced or finalized and sent automatically to producers in early August. Great. So for the two state addenda that we currently have available, we'll dive a little bit further into the details for both of them. So starting with the Oregon state addendum, the next slide has the Colorado state addendum. So for Oregon, the ORSA, Oregon state addendum, includes the clauses you see here, and it's likely that other state addenda will follow a similar layout. Colorado's does on the next slide, but to dive a little deeper into the topic areas that you see on the left, starting with definitions. So this just sets clear definitions of the terms used in the document. For exemptions, it includes details around the state-specific exemptions. those that are expected to be exempt, we still encourage you to sign this state addendum, as it allows us a paper trail to communicate back to regulators that your company is in compliance. However, if you are an exempt producer, you are technically not required to either register, sign a state addendum, or report in Oregon. As for reporting, this has the minimum reporting requirements for Oregon, including the categories and other expectations. In terms of record keeping, this is how our parameters for keeping and maintaining accurate records and the audit rights of CAA. For fees, this has details about how the fee rates will be set and an overview of the methodology. So to note on the fee section, this does not outline what fee rates for each covered material category will actually be. So these change each year as the program costs and volume changes of producer supply data change. We publish a unique fee schedule each year, but do not require a new signature of the state addendum each year. The first fee schedule for Oregon is finalized and has been announced and published to the producer portal already. So lastly, for compliance, the Oregon State Addendum outlines CAA's compliance and enforcement duties with respect to the implementation of the Oregon program. In regards to compliance and accurate fees, it's in the best interest of producers and CAA to be able to ensure that all data is accurately reported and that all obligated producers are participating. Now we can move on to the Colorado State Addendum. As you can see, the topic areas are very similar to Oregon's, so I will not go through this slide fully, just as I've done for Oregon, but you are more than welcome to pause the video if you'd like to read more about the COSA, or the Colorado State Addendum, which as of June 2nd was finalized. And if you registered in Colorado, you indicated your registration in Colorado, this document, including the ORSA, were automatically sent to your authorized representative. Great. Speaking of the document being sent to your authorized representative, how will I receive my state addendum? Just like the PPA, the state addendum is sent via DocuSign to your authorized rep. So to note, only after CAA receives back the signed PPA is the Oregon State Addendum or the Colorado State Addendum sent out for signature. Once CAA receives back the signed PPA, the state addendum is sent out along with portal credentials to the primary contact and authorized representative to CAA's producer portal. So you can immediately start to enter your report data in the portal for Oregon and for Colorado. Importantly, although you can start your state report, producers will not be able to submit a report until they have signed the corresponding state addendum. Lastly, on this slide, we ask that you do not forward the DocuSign email sent to the authorized representative to sign or for someone else to sign. If you need to change the authorized representative, you can please reach out to us at producer.support@circularaction.org, and we'll be happy to update and reissue the DocuSign. Great. Now, a couple of slides here on the Minnesota registration process before we conclude and move on to some next steps. So can we go ahead and talk a little bit about the July 1st registration deadline, which of course has now already passed. If you have missed this deadline, please, and you believe you're obligated in Minnesota, please register with CAA as soon as possible. There are two ways or two methods of registering. So if you're watching this video and you are brand new to Circular Action Alliance, you have not filled out the initial registration form available on our website at all yet. Registration for Minnesota looks exactly the same as the other three states. When you're filling out the registration form, you can essentially just click the box to indicate your registration in Minnesota and hit submit for that registration form. Now, if you're on this call and you registered with CAA prior to April 22nd, so you filled out that registration form earlier in the spring or even prior, you will not have had Minnesota as a box to check to indicate your registration. So therefore, you weren't able to register. So if this is you, if this is your situation, you will need to log into the producer portal and you must proactively add Minnesota to your account to initiate Minnesota registration process. As I mentioned before, the Minnesota interim state addendum will be sent to all registrants promptly once it is made available. We're expecting that to be in August. Until July 18th, the consultation period is live and will take place prior to finalizing the MNINSA, and signing the MNINSA will be required to complete registration. Once the document is finalized and sent out to producers, I think it's worth repeating, you will not be able to make further changes, which is one of the reasons why we have a consultation process to make sure that we can incorporate producer feedback into the final version of the state addenda. So please note that once it is sent to you, you are not able to redline or change the MNINSA, and it must be signed as is. Great. Here are a couple of screenshots that show how to indicate your registration in Minnesota if you filled out the initial registration form prior to April 22nd. It's pretty simple, as just you go to the state registration tab, select yes to indicate your intent to select CAA as your pro in Minnesota, and hit submit. Great. Lastly, before we conclude here, just a couple of notes on the Minnesota interim state addendum consultation process. It is open to all registered producers. So again, if you are watching this prior to July 18th, it is not too late to provide CAA with your feedback on the MNINSA. However, after it closes, as I mentioned before, the document will be finalized and must be signed as is. Great. So for next steps, if you are watching this video and you have not registered at all and you believe you may be obligated, please complete the account registration form available on CAA's website and sign the PPA. In Colorado, ahead of that July 31st reporting deadline, please make sure that you sign the COSA and prepare and submit your data by that, by that deadline. In Oregon, the reports were due by March 31st. The program started July 1st. So if you have still not submitted your Oregon report or paid your Oregon invoice, please do so as soon as possible. Lastly, for Minnesota, please indicate your registration if you have not done so already. That deadline was July 1st. And please also sign the Minnesota interim state addendum when it is made available. Great. Thank you all very much for watching this 102 video. Please stay engaged, register if you've not done so already and you believe you may be obligated. You are more than welcome to visit our Producer Resource Center that's available on our website. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter. If you have any specific questions about registration or reporting support, you're more than welcome to email us at producer.support@circularaction.org, as well as attend an upcoming webinar that we have. We do have live webinars in addition to the recordings you see on our YouTube channel. So please go ahead and register for a future event if you have any additional questions or would like additional support. Great. Thank you so much for watching. We look forward to seeing you in an upcoming webinar, and have a good day.